Hello and welcome to the Power Grid. It's the Football Guys DFS show. It's week 1 of the regular season, and I'm joined, as always, by Jeff Pasquino, Devin Knotts, John Lee, and Ryan Hester. It is so good to kick off the regular season, and we're so excited to do it that we are recording on Monday night. Just so you know, we wanted to get a head start because we just couldn't wait to start talking about week 1. And I want to pitch it to you, Devin, to just give a quick explanation for our listeners what our DFS package is and how they can get in and on it.
Yeah, so we're running a special promotion for week 1. Everything on our site is going to be free. So if you've never subscribed to another site before, if you are a subscriber to another site and you're looking for something else, we're your place to be. So we have 20 different articles each week, videos, an optimizer, which takes our projections and basically will guide you through who the optimal players are for your projection, for your lineups. Staff rankings. So who does our staff like the most based on a value basis? And then what we're most excited for this year is an ownership projection. So everything's going to be free week 1. After that, it's just $44.95 for the year. $15 if you're an Insider Pro subscriber already, so an upgrade. But it's probably the best deal in fantasy sports. It comes out to $3 a week. If you haven't checked us out, check us out for the free week this week.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great offer for this first week for people to get a taste of what we do over at Football Guys. And we're going to be covering the main slate only tonight. So we're not talking about Thursday night games or the 2 Monday night games. We're just going to focus in on those 13 main slate games. Let's look at some of our top stories. And Ryan, I want to talk to you. You live in Orlando, Florida, and you guys in Florida, especially in Miami and kind of all up and down the Florida coast, are preparing for Hurricane Irma. Tell me about what you're seeing down there in Florida. And we've got a home game there in Miami this week, Tampa Bay at Miami. Give us some insight onto what we can expect for that game.
Sure. I mean, I'm definitely not a meteorologist by trade, but I feel like one after following this hurricane and tracking it this weekend. You know, here in Orlando, we're obviously a little nervous about it. And my wife has family in Puerto Rico, which is really going to be brushed up here in the next couple of days. So, you know, first of all, football aside, just hope everybody that's in the path here can prepare and can hunker down, as we say. And, you know, football is kind of secondary to that, of course. But, you know, the hurricane basically looks like it's going to kind of come right up through the bottom of Florida. So Miami will be impacted. Many cities in Florida will be impacted. But there's already rumors that the Tampa and Miami game, and maybe this is, you know, stale data by the time somebody is listening to this, but there's rumors that might move up to Thursday or Friday or even maybe move to a neutral site like Orlando, like New Orleans. The Dolphins already have one home game that they're losing to London this year. They sure don't want to lose another, and they definitely don't want to go to Tampa and play Tampa there. So a lot of logistics going on here. But if the game is played in Miami, be it Thursday, Friday, or Sunday, whenever, it's going to be rainy. It's going to be sloppy. You know, it might not be a game where you want to stack Jameis Winston and Mike Evans just because they're going to be throwing a pretty wet ball around through some rain and wind. So it might just be a stay away from the passing game, especially. Maybe the defenses and running games are better plays. But just keep your eyes on it. Obviously, as Austin mentioned at the top, we're recording on Monday. So, you know, we don't know yet. I've been trying to tell family and friends this thing's going to change 3 more times between now and Thursday anyways. So we may as well tell this audience the same, that to just keep your eyes on it from a football perspective as well, when the game is going to be played and what might happen.
And both of these teams have a week 11 bye. So in some sort of crazy worst case scenario, they could shift the game out to week 11, which would kind of suck for them to not have a real bye during their season. But there's a lot of options still in play here. Devin, let me pass this to you. Talk about another top story. You're a Cleveland Browns fan. What do you think about the Pittsburgh at Cleveland game, Deshaun Kaiser's first regular season start?
Yeah, we talked about it last year. So going back to last year, we were talking about another rookie quarterback, Dak Prescott. Everyone was on him. There's going to be people on Deshaun Kaiser. I have severe reservations about that. If you look at week 3, he was 6 of 18 passing, And then in week 2, when he was playing, 8 of his 10 completions were behind the line of scrimmage. So I think it's more that the Browns don't have anyone to play, rather than Kaiser won the job necessarily. So I think that Pittsburgh's defense, and we'll get into defenses in a little bit, but the other story on this game is how prepared is Le'Veon Bell going to be? So I think we'll get into that a little bit, but he's a running back who relies on timing and relies on his offensive line to create, the timing to be cohesive with that unit. And he hasn't been in preseason. So that's a concern heading into week 1 for me.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting situation to watch. He's come in without a whole lot of preparation before, but this is probably the least preparation I feel like he's had coming into a game. Let's move on to Vegas and see what the Vegas odds makers are telling us. In preseason, we didn't pay so much attention to them, but in regular season, this is something that we look more closely at. Ryan, I'm going to kick it to you first on Vegas. What in the Vegas lines or totals draws your interest this week for DFS play?
Well, we've got some high total games. I mean, Arizona, Detroit is one that I'm going to have to dig into this week, but on the surface, it seems like there's some value to be mined. I mean, first of all, it's an indoor game, so you've got the fast surface. It's a reasonably high total, and the line's not too big, so that suggests both teams will score points. So it's just a matter of then cracking into the matchups and figuring out where the points are going to come from, of course. That's just the name of our game here. So that one kind of sticks out. And then, we've got a couple other shootouts with some relatively low lines that, I'm sure we'll get to here as we talk stacks and GPP plays later. But the one that I'm probably going to look at the most, just because it seems the hardest to diagnose, is that Arizona-Detroit game.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And I think there's some GPP opportunities there for sure. Devin, what is Vegas telling you this week?
Yeah, I think the one surprise is that the Seattle-Green Bay game is at 50.5. So Green Bay is projected to score 26.75 points, which a lot of people hate to play against Seattle. And I get why they have a pedigree, but Green Bay is one of, if not the highest projected team on the board this week. Aaron Rodgers will go under-owned because he's playing Seattle, just because people have a tendency not to play them. But at 26.75 points this week, where are those touchdowns going to come from? So that's a team that I'm really looking at as a contrarian play.
I like it. And I think that's the kind of strategy you want to use generally is there a defense out there that's going to scare off enough ownership, but it's an elite enough offense that it kind of doesn't matter, especially when Seattle's on the road here in this situation. John, tell me about Vegas. What is it saying to you this week?
It's telling me to stay away from a couple games. I mean, I think we can largely ignore the game going on in New York this week with Buffalo and the Jets. Outside of potentially Zay Jones, maybe because he's such a value play, and there isn't a whole lot in terms of receivers with the Bills. I think we can avoid pretty much everything that's going on there. LaShawn McCoy is a guy that certainly you can get behind because of the line. They're 8-point favorites. They'll be feeding him heavily. We'll see in this case that, Jonathan Williams, I think, was released yesterday. So there isn't a whole lot beyond like Joe Banyard behind him. So I think that you definitely
Mike Tolbert. Don't forget Mike Tolbert.
Mike Tolbert. That's this week's big vulture in the weeds, right? Like McCoy gets down to the 1 yard line. He's owned at 50% across the board. And then Tolbert rushes 2 touchdowns in from the 1 yard line.
Didn't Mike Gillislee score 8 or 9 last year for Buffalo? Sam.
Yeah. It's certainly possible.
Mike Tolbert wins someone $1 billion this week.
$1 billion with a B.
Mike Tolbert is no Mike Gillislee.
So yeah, I think that's a game that largely I will avoid, certainly from the Jets' perspective, because of the quarterback play there. There's nobody on the Jets that I can get behind this week outside of maybe Bilal Powell, and I think that the sites have priced him accordingly. So I would avoid them. And the Jaguars playing against the Texans are a team I want no part of. And ultimately, one more team that I'll tell you I'm completely avoiding this week. I think the Colts. There isn't a single player on that team, and I mean a single player, who I would even consider rostering across the DFS industry. because of all the problems they have going on in that offense. So those are three teams that Vegas are telling me stay away from them. Their implied team totals are less than 20 points. And in certain cases, I wouldn't be surprised if those teams don't reach double digits.
Yeah, and you bring up Bilal Powell there. I like Bilal Powell on the season, but for this game, I don't like him at all. Matt Forte is still there, and I feel like early in the season, he's going to be taking that work. And later in the season, we'll see Powell emerge more as Forte wears down. Jeff, you flashed a red, black-eyed Joe, but I think it was because you said LaShawn McCoy is probably the play that you would make in that Jets-Buffalo game. Did I read that correctly?
I've actually got two players that are worth looking at in that game, just from a value and a price point, and we can touch them later. But
sure.
I got a receiver for the Jets, and I got a tight end in the game too.
Oh, all right. Well, tell me if there's anything else Vegas is screaming at you.
I'm a little surprised at Carolina, San Francisco being so high. I thought that was a high total, being 48. That seemed a little odd to me. I think the line was only a few points too, 6.5. But Cam's coming off an injury. Are we really thinking we're going to get 27 out of Carolina? And San Francisco has this weird week one thing that they always seem to do. It's odd, but they're projected for 21 points. I'm not sure that happens either. This is a game that can really blow up the slate. I don't know what to do with it just yet. I don't trust the offenses on either side, but I'll throw the sleeper running back. I like McCaffrey going back to the Bay Area as a rookie in his first game. I think that he could do pretty well and be surprised. That might be where the points are coming from.
Yeah, that's a good call. I'm with you on that Carolina-San Francisco line. That was the most surprising of all the lines I saw this week. I'm not so confident in Cam Newton's ability to throw yet until he heals a bit more. Some other teams we want to look out for. Atlanta is the highest scoring team according to Vegas, and we have already talked about some of the other big scoring teams. Green Bay, Tennessee, Carolina, and Pittsburgh. Those are the top 5 scoring according to Vegas at the moment. Let's talk chalk, guys. This is where we sort of get all the most obvious plays out of our system so that when we go to the positional breakdowns, we're digging a little bit deeper. Let's talk about chalk here. Jeff, I'll pitch it back to you since you've gone last a couple of times here to mention a couple of chalk plays that you think will just be crazy high owned, and maybe mention whether you think there's any sort of fool's gold there. Like, are these guys that should be high owned, or are you a little nervous about any of these guys?
Well, I kind of lean to where John's saying that, the chalk's going to be pay up at running back, pay down at wide receiver. I also think you pay up at tight end. I think that the upper tier tight end, your Graham, your Olsen. I like Delanie Walker. I do think there's a couple of value at tight end that that's another way to differentiate this week, to go cheaper at tight end. Quarterback, there's going to be temptation this week to go cheap at quarterback, and we talk about it all the time. Devin and I were talking about it before the show. Going cheap at quarterback is usually a bad idea, just not only because you can just get some value, but quarterback is, if you play other sports, it's like a pitcher in baseball. You want to lock in the high points and the high dollar value and get 2.5 to 3x as much as you can, which means pay up a quarterback. That's usually the safer way to go, the better way to go, especially in cash. So, but I think that you're going to be targeting the high-scoring guys, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. I like Mariota this week in the high-scoring game. Derek Carr's going to look good too. I don't think there's going to be a true chalk quarterback, though, because there's so many names to spread around ownership. But the chalk is really going to come from your upper-tier running backs, your Bell, your David Johnson, and a couple of value wide receivers that are going to really stand out, like a Larry Fitzgerald.
I think that those are largely FanDuel specific. So on DraftKings, I think with the salary being a little bit tighter, it is okay to go chalk or go lower price quarterbacks. One guy I think that will be popular is Carson Wentz at just 5,300 in a good matchup. He allows you to save a lot of money, and he throws the ball at a significant rate. So one thing I want to call out at FanDuel, you probably want to spend up at quarterback just because the quarterback group is so tightly knit from a salary perspective. But at DraftKings, you can look at cheaper quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'm enjoying that pricing over at DraftKings a little bit more because I think it's going to create some more lineup variety. So I think that's a great point to bring that up. There's some appealing quarterbacks that don't have to be scraping the bottom of the barrel to find some value for your starting lineup, and I'm having a much harder time finding that at FanDuel. Ryan, are there any other chalk plays you see here? We've mentioned quite a few here already. Is there one other guy that stands out to you?
Yeah, well, I think Jeff mentioned Larry Fitzgerald, right? So that was one, but yeah, then Jeff did mention going high price at tight end, but sometimes a lot of people don't like to do that. So I do think you'll see Zach Ertz be owned pretty heavily as well. I think he's definitely a tier or two below those other guys in terms of their pricing. So Zach Ertz is going to be somebody I'll look to in cash, but not in tournaments. I think he'll be owned pretty high.
Especially over at DraftKings. Zach Ertz's price is silly low over at DraftKings. He's going to have some crazy high ownership over there.
His average is number 1 across 9 staffers. So normally the average is 2.4 because guys will have somebody ranked 1, 2, 7 through 12. He is ranked 1.0 out of 9 guys. So 8 of those 9 have him as our number 1 guy in our staff rankings.
And who doesn't have him as number 1? That's a good question.
Chad Parsons has him as number 3.
Okay.
Still pretty high.
And to be clear, that the staff rankings, just for everybody that doesn't know, are on a points per dollar, like a value basis, not a total points basis. So
correct. The other guy that's really highly rated on our staff rankings on DraftKings is Todd Gurley at 6,000, going up against that Colts defense, which he's one of our top ranked guys at 6,000. He should easily hit. I shouldn't say easily because he had a down year last year, but our staff is expecting him to rebound in a very favorable matchup against the Colts.
Yeah, and that's one of the great free features you can find over at footballguys.com/DFS this week. We do FanDuel value plays and DraftKings value plays, so it's kind of separated out based on the salaries people are seeing. John, help us wrap up the chalk plays. Did we miss any, or did we kind of already mention the key ones here?
Yeah, I think we've mentioned them. We're going to talk about quarterbacks again in a bit, so we'll save some of that. But I will echo what Devin said because he basically stole what I wanted to say, and that is you really have to play these two sites differently, right? So DK last year introduced this lower quarterback pricing where the bottom was really low, and FanDuel has always kept everything kind of high. And some people they won't welcome that because it means you have to take game strategy into account. But if you're a sharp player, it's an excellent way to build in some diversity into your gameplay. That way, if somebody does get hurt or somebody does have an unexpected poor performance, all of your eggs are not in the same basket, and it kind of allows you then to balance some risk. So certainly take that into account when you're building out your rosters. If you have a lot of Scott Tolzien, I would be the guy to recommend getting him at a site where okay, I'm gonna beat you. So I got a whole lot of those of you listening, all the red black-eyed Joes came out, and that's to say don't play Scott Tolzien this week. I'm going to bring him up now because I think that our esteemed colleague and site owner David Dodds is a big Scott Tolzien fan this week. Yeah. He's going to tell you, I think, that he loves this play. And so if you're a Dodds follower, if you're going to play Tolzien, I think there's one site you play him, and maybe you don't play him on the other site. And you have to find out where that value is. And we have a wonderful tool on the site to do that. It's actually a program, I guess we can call it. Austin and
Sure.
Marl Tremblay put it together. It's called Evaluator. You can find it on our DFS landing page. And basically what it does is it tells you, as a rule, where the best value for a given player can be found. So if you want exposure to Scott Tolzien, you can go there and click quarterbacks, and it will tell you where that value is and what site you should be playing him. So a lot of information there, but the bottom line is gain some diversity across these sites and use their pricing strategies or their pricing schemes to your advantage, not against you.
If you start Scott Tolzien, I will drive to your house, knock on your door, and tell you not to start Scott Tolzien, which will not make my wife very happy that I'm gone all weekend. So don't start Scott Tolzien.
It's a lot of driving.
Drive to California now.
That was a lot nicer way than I thought you were going to put it.
Yeah, I thought there was going to be some sort of violence in there.
Nope.
Yeah, exactly. Something about meeting a stranger in the Alps or something.
Nope.
Hey,
Just don't do it.
Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Austin, if I could throw one more thing in while we're talking about quarterbacks of all different price ranges.
Sure.
One thing David Dodds does, one piece of advice he gives that I do like to follow, unlike Scott Tolzien, is that, to diversify cash lineups, one thing he says is, just start at the quarterback position. And if you like to do 3, let's say, pick a high-end guy, pick a middle-end guy, pick a low-end guy. And then as you fill your lineup, it'll kind of naturally diversify itself from there based on the amount of money you have left. So that's just a strategy that, since we were talking general earlier, that's one people might want to follow there too.
Yep, that's a good tip. I appreciate that one. So speaking of quarterbacks, let's dig into this a little bit. Obviously, Andrew Luck is going to be out this week, so we've got Scott Tolzien starting. Play at your own risk. Joe Flacco is coming back after not really seeing any sort of action in the preseason. We've also got Tyrod Taylor with a concussion, but it sounds like he's going to play. He returned to practice on Monday, even though he's not quite through the concussion protocol. And then Cam Newton has a shoulder that is supposedly better. He's going to play, but it does make me a little bit nervous. Ryan, I'll kick it to you on quarterbacks. Do any of these injured players change your outlook on their related players? Or are you kind of cool with any of these guys? Like, hey, maybe one of these guys is a great tournament play because people are going to be off of him.
Yeah, I think you just hit it. If anything, it's a tournament play. I mean, Carolina does have a high projected total, and Vegas tends to be smarter than the average bear. So maybe Cam Newton's worth playing in a game that maybe could be a surprise shootout if you listen to the guys in the desert. John talked about it earlier too, and I don't think Devin will come to my house and tell me not to play him, but he might hold up a red black-eyed Joe. Is there could be a letdown for Dallas, and Eli Manning is awfully cheap, and he does have a receiver who he can throw a slant to and take it for an 80-yard touchdown at any given time.
If he plays.
Correct, if he plays, that's true. But so if Beckham doesn't play, I don't think anybody's playing Manning, but that's something that'd be interesting to keep in mind as well, and what could be a pretty big distraction spot for Dallas, which could allow the Giants to score some points.
I think that's a great point. Devin, who are some quarterbacks you like this week?
Yeah, one name that I haven't heard is Matt Ryan. So Matt Ryan is highly priced because of his great year last year. The team's projected to score just over 28 points, and he was the number 1 overall fantasy quarterback last year. He won people a lot of money, and we had him early on. I was telling people to start him because he's a much better quarterback than people think. I think a lot of people are going to be scared off of him just because of that high price tag. So he's definitely a guy that you could look at as a contrarian play this week.
I like that. Jeff, why don't you tell us another quarterback that you like? Maybe a GPP play here.
GPP play. Well, I do like Eli. I definitely do like Eli. I like both quarterbacks in the Philly-Washington game. I think both those guys are options in GPP. We mentioned Carson Wentz earlier. I think Kirk Cousins. They still don't – it's not clear what they're doing at running back. That game could be high scoring. You can see some back and forth. Jordan Reed's allegedly healthy, but he's going to throw the ball to Terrell Pryor. Crowder has always done well against the Eagles in the slot. They don't do well against slot receivers. I could see Kirk Cousins having a pretty good game, and no one's looking at him right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. That game is another one I have my eye on for sure. John, I'm going to pitch it to you for running backs, but if you've got any other quarterbacks you want to talk to, throw that in. But we're going to see a lot of ownership out of Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson. So help us find some running backs that aren't those two guys.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I'm going to go back to quarterback just really quickly. Sure. I think somebody we have to think about from a GPP perspective this week is Ben Roethlisberger. I know everybody hates to play him away from home, but the Steelers have the second highest team total on the board, and Le'Veon Bell has yet to practice. Maybe he practiced today. I could see a situation where the Steelers try to do their thing this week. I hate these black-eyed Joes for the record because
Jeff is dancing.
All that I do is watch you guys flip them, and it takes away my train of thought. I should just turn you guys off because none of you are attractive enough for me to I don't want to be looking at you anyhow, but somehow I have you pulled up here on the screen, distracting me to the end of the day. Anyhow, Roethlisberger, team total, 4 touchdowns. Le'Veon Bell, hey, he might score 2 touchdowns, but you know what? He can do both of those through the air. It would not surprise me at all to see Roethlisberger finish this game with 300 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. And if he does so, he'll do it at low ownership because of historically how bad he's been on the road. And all the other quarterbacks that we've already talked about. We went through 4 different people talking about quarterbacks, and nobody mentioned him. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so Jeff is flashing up the red black-eyed Joe through the entire time, and then the Steelers fan Ryan is like, all greens. Pittsburgh's got this. So Jeff, tell me why no on Ben Roethlisberger.
Well, Ryan and I actually did a little homework on this. He helped me out with the one of the preseason articles I did, which is I do quarterback by committee. I helped Chase out with that this year. But I did a special one for quarterback Ben by committee because a lot of people were like, I want to draft Roethlisberger, but I don't want to start him on the road. So I went and looked at him and said, how does he do on the road? And then if you're going to start one time, we know the Steelers are favored by 9. It's week 1. It's at Cleveland. What better case would you have to start Roethlisberger? He doesn't have good stats in Cleveland. The numbers are like 30% worse than normal. So, yes, you can make a case for anybody in GBP, and yes, he will be lower owned, but there's a reason he's going to be lower owned in this game. Pittsburgh's going to be ahead 16-0 before halftime, and then everybody's going to be running the ball and kicking field goals. I don't see them throwing the ball deep. I think that Roethlisberger, history indicates that he's not going to do highly here. I think this is a game this is a tune-up game for Le'Veon Bell. He's going to run the second half and get that's going to be his preseason. And I just don't see Roethlisberger getting that 300 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns. There's a lot better options to look for that.
Devin, I think you just called your Browns the preseason for the Steelers. Have any rebuttal?
He did.
They win this game.
The Browns?
The Browns do?
Oh,
Yep.
man.
Wait. Can I
Upset of the week.
Can I talk about the previous point? Because I don't even want to talk about the Steelers losing.
You're not going to challenge him to a bet? A Browns fan versus a Steelers fan? Someone shaving their head or something?
Maybe. But before I get off topic on so my research for Jeff's column has just been watching every Steeler game for the last few years because Roethlisberger has been just brutal on the road, and it's true. But, all the splits do include last year, week 1 at Washington, 27 of 37, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns in a week 1 on the road with a ton of time to prepare. Weather's favorable. You don't have Mike Tomlin in his old school, we have to run because we're on the road mentality necessarily because there is a lot of time to prepare. While Le'Veon Bell might get 15 carries in the fourth quarter of this game, you might get 302 or 3 touchdowns out of Roethlisberger before that last 15 minutes. It's possible. And while this might be Le'Veon Bell's preseason, Roethlisberger hasn't thrown a deep ball to Martavis Bryant in over a year. So there's little chance that they want to cut him loose on that as well. So it's a game theory thing, right, Jeff? I mean, you could absolutely be right. There's a chance you're right, but there's also a chance that everybody owns Le'Veon Bell and you stack Roethlisberger with one of his receivers and you're way ahead of everybody. So just on game theory alone, I would toss a lineup in with it. So just my 2 cents.
There's a chance.
Yeah, there's always a chance. But yeah.
What's all that 1 in a million talk?
John, carry us forward by talking about some running backs.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, running backs. I think this week it really is a very straightforward thing with Bell and DJ David Johnson there in Arizona. If McFadden does get the start, I think the statistics play out in terms of our projections on Football Guys. He should see plenty of action there, and he's fairly priced. I like Todd Gurley this week. I think Todd Gurley will be highly owned against the Colts. And I think from a GPP perspective and potentially depending on the site you're playing, Carlos Hyde is too cheap on DraftKings, and I think there he is cash game viable. I'm not certainly suggesting that you do play him because I think you still want exposure to those big guys. But Hyde is a guy that he could light it up this weekend at a very cheap price.
I feel like that Darren McFadden play works a lot better on FanDuel than it does on DraftKings. I feel like DraftKings priced him as if he's definitely the starter, and FanDuel kind of like, I don't know. So if you're going to play McFadden, I'd look for him on a FanDuel lineup. Ryan, tell us about some other running backs you like.
Yeah, so, well, I like DeMarco Murray because we did mention the Tennessee-Oakland game as well. So, Murray's going to be the workhorse there. At least we certainly expect so. The other thing I like doing is if we're seeing popular stacks in the passing game in certain instances, why not just take the running back? We like to stack passing games because it's going to be a high-scoring game, but how many times do we see a pass interference in the end zone and the running back falls in and gets you 6 points? Not that Ty Montgomery is a faller-inner per se, but why not take Ty Montgomery against Seattle? We know that they like to defend the perimeter as well, so middle of the field might be open coming out of the backfield. Maybe he gets a 1-yard touchdown run. So I have my eye on him in a GPP. And Devontae Freeman as well, just game script. I don't see any way that the Bears keep that thing close. So, we talked about running out the clock earlier, but with Pittsburgh, maybe Devontae Freeman does so with Atlanta too.
I like that Freeman call. Devin, tell me about another running back, maybe one that's a little bit cheaper or a little more off the radar.
Sure. Isaiah Crowell, going back to the Browns. On DraftKings, he's going to be one of their focal points this year. So at just 5,300, he's a guy who really improved as a receiver this year or last year. So I think that you could see a lot of dump offs to Crowell this week. Because Kaiser's first start, and he's not going to want to throw it deep consistently. He's going to just want to try and keep it within the offense and move the ball down the field. And I think Crowell has the ability to do it.
Let me ask you guys a question. In a snake format like playdraft.com, is David Johnson your top pick this week? Like, hold up your Black Eye Joe if you think David Johnson is your top pick this week, if you're in a snake format with the first pick. Is that maybe not? I've got green for me, Devin, and John, and I got Ryan and Jeff flashing red. Jeff, tell me who you'd take at the top this week.
I take Johnson second. I put Bell first.
Yep, and I think that's kind of the choice. And, yeah, Ryan's agreeing with you. It's got to be one of those two guys to me. Just wanted to throw a curveball there to you guys.
Just one thing for play draft strategy. Wait on quarterbacks, particularly if you're in a less than 10-person league, because if someone burns a quarterback early, there's no bench spot, so they can't take another quarterback to block you. So you in a 10-person or 6-person, or especially in the head-to-heads, you should be waiting towards the end because the difference between the number 1 and number 10 quarterback isn't really that high. But in a head-to-head or in a 6-man, you're basically guaranteeing yourself a top 2 or top 6 quarterback. So wait on quarterbacks, take the running backs, take the wide receivers early.
Yep, that's good advice. I like that. Wide receivers, guys.
Hey, I'm not done with running backs yet.
You got more Tell me about another running back, Jeff, and then take us into receivers too. Hit me.
Well, there's a running back I don't think that's been mentioned yet that I'm really high on. I think, we mentioned McCoy. We mentioned McCaffrey. I think is a GPP play. I like the Ty Montgomery play. But the one I'm looking at is Lamar Miller for Houston. I think that Houston is favored. The game script is going to be that they're going to control the ball. No one likes Tom Savage. I don't buy any of that passing game. I think Lamar Miller is going to be the offense for Houston, and that game is going to be a grind out 21, 24, 10 kind of game where they just, again, dominate the touches. And I think Miller is like almost a lock for 100 yards and a touchdown.
The other interesting thing about that is that both Deonta Foreman and Alfred Blue are banged up right now. Mm-hmm. So their running game may have to lean a little more heavily on Lamar Miller this week than they ordinarily would.
And he's super cheap on DraftKings at 5,100. I like that call as well.
He's the highest ranked guy on DraftKings on the evaluator that was mentioned earlier too.
There we go.
Nice. Jeff, back to you. Any other running backs, or you got some receivers for us?
Let's just transition over to the wide receivers. Let's go back to what we talked about early at the top of the show, then stick to DraftKings. The wide receiver I was looking at for the Jets is Robbie Anderson at $3,800 on DraftKings. That's way too cheap. I think that he's got a ton of value. I think he's going to – we don't like the Jets, yes, but he's probably a lock for 6 or 7 catches and 75 yards, and that's going to pay more than pay off $3,800. If you need a cheap wide receiver to round out your lineup or your flex spot, that's a great option. I think that's a guy, and he's the wide. You can't get a wide receiver one for under $4,000 very often. So,
well, hold on one second. Now, Devin, if Hackenberg's on the sideline, you can't sail them over our heads this week, can he? Or will he get into the second half?
He is one missed block away from being the quarterback, because if McCown takes a hit, he's 39 years old. I want no part of any Jets ever with the risk of Hackenberg being a quarterback.
Just him being near the field just scares you away from the whole team.
The 10% chance that he's in this game scares me off of it. I'd rather go Kendall Wright from the Bears.
Okay, we'll come back to Kendall Wright. Let's go back to Jeff because I interrupted him, and then I like that Kendall Wright pick. That's good. Jeff, tell me about another receiver.
All right, there's a lot of guys I'd like to know. We're all looking for value here because, especially on FanDuel, which I looked at most this week before the show, we're looking for the cheaper guys. But I think that the Arizona-Detroit game, Larry Fitzgerald is too cheap on FanDuel. You're never going to get him healthier than week one. Same for Carson Palmer. A lot of points expected from this game. I really like him a lot. I want a piece of the Seattle offense. And I don't know what they're going to do with the ground game, but I think they're going to throw the ball, and that means Doug Baldwin. So that's a top option for me there. I also like both starting receivers for Oakland. I think you got Cooper and Crabtree. They're going to get a lot of work. I don't trust the ground game for Oakland. Those are options. And Rashard Matthews is too cheap, I think. But we're going to get into some of the cheaper guys. We got Chicago options. We got several other options. I'll save them for the rest of the guys. And I do like the Eli Manning that we've talked about a lot. I think Brandon Marshall is going to get overlooked. I think everybody's going to be looking at Odell Beckham, but Marshall is a touchdown guy. He is a wide receiver 1 on nearly any other team. He gets to be a wide receiver 2, which would made Anquan Bolden fantastic when he worked with Larry Fitzgerald earlier in his career. I think Marshall, in the back end of his career, he could produce a lot of good numbers in that role.
And I think if Beckham sits, we'll see Sterling Shepard's ownership go up as well. He'd be the guy I'd be targeting over there. In Oakland, I'm still on Crabtree until I see them use Cooper more in the red zone. Crabtree tends to be the guy that's scoring more often for them. So as much as I'd like to see Cooper be that dynamic number 1, I still feel like Crabtree's the guy for scoring fantasy points. Devin, tell me more. You said Kendall Wright is a receiver that you're.
I'll make it real quick because I'm sure John has a list of who the top matchups are. But Kendall Wright. So I've watched, being in Chicago, not a Bears fan, but I've watched every single Bears preseason game. Kendall Wright, since the Cameron Meredith injury, just keeps getting targeted, and he's a volume guy, especially on DraftKings or PPR. Don't like him so much on FanDuel where it's softer pricing and half point. But I think he's a guy who's going to get 7 or 8 targets, 5 catches, 6 catches for 50, 60, 70 yards. So he's a guy that I'm looking at quite a bit. I just can't do any Jets.
John, you tend to dig into these receiver cornerback matchups and really analyze these. Tell me what you're seeing in the matchups this week that might be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think so I'm not that far along yet with recording on Monday night with regards to kind of knowing what defensive schemes some of the teams are running out there. I certainly love the matchup, Larry Fitzgerald. I think he's going to be one of the most highly owned guys this week, and for good reason. He's going to run out of the slot. He's going to go up against Quandre Diggs there in Detroit, and Diggs had a really rough season covering slot receivers last season. I see no reason for that to change. And we all know traditionally, if you're going to roster Fitzgerald as he's getting up there in age, I mean, he's almost as old as Jeff. He's, I didn't see any red flags there. Ed Red Hawkeye Jones. So I guess we're all in agreement for once.
Those aren't red flags; they're flame emojis.
They're saying there's a chance Jeff could be the GPP hit of the week.
Yeah, but I mean that's an excellent matchup that I did pick out earlier. Last year in the first month of the season, Larry Fitzgerald averaged 10 targets per game, and he really does get a nice matchup. One guy I'll fade based on matchups this week. I won't have a whole lot because he's super expensive. That's AJ Green. He's over $8,000 on DraftKings, and he's going up against a Baltimore secondary that I think will be much improved this year. They have Jimmy Smith, who appears to be healthy. They have Brandon Carr from Kansas City / Dallas, who isn't a terrible cornerback in his own right. And then they get over the top help from Eric Weddell. from the Chargers a few years back. So I think their secondary will be much improved. I just don't want to pay that price this week on AJ Green. And so I think I'll fade him. Overall, though, my larger message is I think this is a week where we're going to go cheap at the wide receiver position because you want that guaranteed volume at the running back position. And so you're going to hear guys like Kendall Wright. I think that's the best play, the best value play that I've seen thus far in the week. Zay Jones is another person I like because I think that Tyrod Taylor, he knows his job's on the line. He cannot afford to turn the ball over. He's going to throw it to his possession receivers. Zay Jones fits that bill coming out of NCAA. A possession receiver there, broke the record for receptions in the season. And so these are the types of guys that I'll be looking for to round out my cash game rosters as we close down our roster building for week 1.
And that Zay Jones play may hinge a little bit on whether we see Jordan Matthews in this game. He's questionable with a chest injury. Not quite sure whether he's going to make it. But even if he plays, Zay Jones could still be the number 1 there for week 1 since Matthews hasn't had a whole lot of time to acclimate to this offense yet. Looking at tight ends, there aren't any really noteworthy sort of injuries that I'm seeing here other than maybe Eric Swoop was sent to IR, but I'm not really interested in trying to jump on the Jack Doyle train unless Andrew Luck is under center here. And then we mentioned Jordan Reed before. It sounds like he's healthy and he's going to play. Might want to take that while the getting's good. I don't know how long that's going to last. But Ryan, give me your tight end play of the week that isn't Zach Ertz. It sounds like people are all over Ertz, especially at DraftKings.
Yeah, I have one, and I think Jeff alluded to it earlier, so I'm going to leave this potential cash game value to Jeff because I think he's going to hit it later. We talked about Green Bay and Seattle a little bit. I did want to note earlier, last year Green Bay did put up 38 on Seattle, so if you're scared of it, don't be. I mean, it's still Aaron Rodgers. It's a tough matchup, but it's still Aaron Rodgers. So if you want a piece of Green Bay, Martellus Bennett is a cheap way to do it. Maybe more of a GPP play just because we talked about Ertz being safer and then the high-end guys being safer, but that middle layer may not really be touched. So Martellus Bennett there, another way to get a Green Bay player on your team.
Yeah. Devin, who's a tight end you like?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you, Austin, a little bit on Jack Doyle. Scott Tolzien last year had 11 targets to tight ends in his one game that he played. So if Swoop is out, what other tight end do they have? So I'll have a little bit of Jack Doyle. Not a lot because I think that people will be scared off of him. But 11 targets, if they're going to tight ends, we know that Tolzien doesn't have a great arm. Who else is he going to throw it to?
Tolzien Doyle for $1 billion.
But to be clear, Scott Tolzien, right?
Correct. I'm not starting Tolzien.
Naked Doyle.
Naked Doyle.
And it's not Jack Daniels, it's Jack Doyle.
Correct.
Okay, just making sure. That's a pretty large sample size there. That one game sample size.
Hey,
it's something. It's something. No, I could see it happening as like the one guy he's able to connect with. That
I mean, he doesn't have an arm. We know that. So
right.
He's not throwing to T.Y. Hilton deep. Who's he throwing it to?
Yeah, definitely not T.Y. Hilton. It's someone like Doyle for sure. John, tight ends. Who do you got?
I mean, Jimmy Graham is a guy I think that could be on the radar this week. Certainly the Seahawks showed us last year that they finally figured out how to use him. I don't know what took so long, but he had an excellent season. I look for him to continue being a top-end tight end every week. Zach Ertz is it. I mean, it really we can sit here and pound the pavement about all the other guys. If you want a GPP guy on DraftKings, you're looking to save salary. George Kittle had a hell of a preseason. He's 2,500, scraping the bottom of the barrel there. If he gets you, I don't know, 2 catches for 50 yards or something to that effect, he's really looked good. And it's the reason that Vance McDonald was traded to the Steelers. So I'm not going to be surprised to see him have a big game. And at 2,500, he's a way to get away from Ertz and still stay at a fairly low price point.
That's a good point. Jeff, I know you've got one more tight end you want to mention. I can see that look on your face.
Absolutely, I've got one. But I'm going to echo John's point in a minute there. I think that another way to differentiate this week, especially on DraftKings because they're so cheap and there's so much value, is you can go 2 tight ends. I think that a lot of people are going to go wide receiver in that spot or try to squeeze in the third running back. But I think 2 tight ends, there's a lot of value there. There's going to be a lot of chalk at wide receiver, but not many people are going to go 2 tight ends. So that's a good play, and that you can get some value there. But the tight end that I've been saving to mention is Charles Clay, and that's for Buffalo. I get the Zach Jones. If I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm going to be covering Zach Jones a lot. He's
Zay Jones, you mean? Yeah.
Zay Jones. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I'm going to Charles Clay. When Tyrod Taylor was doing well, he would hit Clay a lot, and I think that's where he's going to go back to again. And again, the Bills are favored. The Jets are terrible. We expect them to get blown up. I think Charles Clay is a good option. That pretty much puts a nice bow on. We mentioned Lonnie Walker. I think that you can make a case a little bit for Zach Miller. That's where the Zach came from in my head. But Zach Miller for the Bears, I think that he might see a lot of targets for a game that's supposed to be high scoring for the Bears. Where are those points coming from? Maybe from Zach Miller. But I think that the sleeper tight end for if I'm going to go down in value or on price on FanDuel, Charles Clay is my target.
Right on. And the Falcons did struggle against the tight end quite a bit last year, so Zach Miller may work out as a GPP play. And other high-priced guys like Eifert is probably on the radar, although that's a pretty low-scoring game. And then you could do Greg Olsen, although you have to wonder if Cam Newton is 100% in that game. So probably Graham and Walker are the higher-owned guys in that price range. All right, let me see the Black-Eyed Joes. Who wants to talk about defenses or kickers? I see. All right, okay. John, I'm not surprised. This doesn't disappoint me that you were the only one to hold up the red Black-Eyed Joe. You just take a little rest there, and we'll come back to you in a little bit. Devin, I want to ask you, is the same magical kicker theory from last season still alive and well? Do we just keep going with your plan?
It's alive for one more week.
Just one more?
And for those that didn't watch, I think every single show last year I said, just start Matt Bryant at kicker. The reason I did that is because he was about 4,500 for the first 6 or 7 or 8 weeks. Too good of a value in that offense. This year, he comes out, and I think he's priced one of the highest kickers out there. I'm going one more week with Matt Bryant because I believe that the Falcons will score a significant amount of points this week. He's not going to be nearly as high owned as it was last year at certain points because he is one of the top kickers and he's on the road. But he will be a guy that I will be heavily invested in. But we're not doing the start Matt Bryant every single week like we did last year.
I don't know. I feel like this is the end of an era.
I mean, he's 43, so at some point, all good things have to end.
Man, I'm just shed a little tear for Matt Bryant and Devin Knotts' happy relationship.
It's a breakup.
Yeah.
I got married in the offseason. It's a breakup.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. Well, I hope he took it okay. Ryan, do you have any defenses or kickers you want to talk about?
I do. So, Devin, when you're knocking on doors all week, instead of telling people not to start Scott Tolzien, tell them to start the Rams defense against Scott Tolzien instead.
There you go. I like that. That's a good alternative. Also a very friendly sort of door-to-door message.
Exactly.
The non-fantasy fans will be very confused, but they'll be, okay, thank you, see you later. Back away slowly. Jeff, you don't like to talk about defenses or kickers, do you?
No, they're just
probably got something.
Throw anything in there, it'll work out fine. No, there's 3 kickers and there's 3 defenses that I'm looking at. I kind of like the Rams. I haven't looked at their price, but there's the 3 defenses that I like looking at. Then I'll wrap it up with kickers. My number 1 defense is Pittsburgh at Cleveland. I think that's going to be they're favored by 9. It's a low-scoring game. I think that's where we're going to be. You get a rookie quarterback. I think that's a very safe option. My number 2 is more of a GPP play because I'm going to be playing a lot of Steelers, but I love Houston defense. I think we're going to be looking at a situation where it's very similar to Hurricane Katrina. Just though they're going back from Tropical Storm Harvey, the community's going to rally around the team. It's going to be a gathering point. Everybody's going to be behind the team, and Jacksonville is going to get pounded into the dirt. So I think that I like the Texans a lot. It could be a low-scoring game, but that favors the defense. J.J. Watt may even score. Third defense I'm looking at, Buffalo against the Jets. I think we all hate the Jets. We think the Jets are going to be terrible. Buffalo's defense is going to be getting right after them right from the kickoff. I like them. Now, to flip it to kickers, I like Matt Bryant. I know that Ryan, Devin and I fought over picking him on each week, but he had a great season last year. There's no kicker that had a great season last year. It's going to be very low owned. Then that's my GPP guy, and that's Justin Tucker for the Ravens. He had 7 field goals of 50+. That's 5 points on FanDuel, the only site that uses kickers anymore for some reason. But Tucker is probably he's the most expensive kicker, but he's the best kicker. He has the best career accuracy, and no one's going to want to pay up for a kicker. So if you want to have a low-owned, high-probability guy who's probably going to lead the Ravens in scoring this week, and last year in November he kicked 3 50+ field goals against the Bengals to win the game. He's 11 for 12 against the Bengals. He's a great lock as a high-end kicker. My cash guy is going to be Ryan Suckup because I'm probably going to be leaning towards playing either Mariota or Delanie Walker, and that raises your general floor. If your quarterback doesn't find the end zone, your kicker is going to take care of it, and Suckup is a quality kicker, and you want kickers who are at home, favored teams that are expected to score at least 24 points. Tennessee checks all 3 of those boxes. The third kicker, and I'll wrap it up because I know John is dying because of this, the guy I liked in the preseason in week 3, I'm going to go right back to him with Phil Dawson, Arizona, at Detroit. High-scoring game in the Dome. He hit the 50+ yarder, which I called in the week 3. I think he hits another one again. They're willing to use him from long distance, and I think he scores plenty of points for you. That's another guy that's not going to be as widely owned.
One more defense just to wrap this thing up.
Sure.
Enough of the kicker talk. But Jacksonville. So Jacksonville signed A.J. Bouye in the offseason, who I'm sure John could go on a lecture about how good this guy is. He's ranked as one of the top corners in football. So they have A.J. Bouye and Jalen Ramsey, who are tremendous coverage guys. They also signed Calais Campbell and Barry Church. So they made some big moves in the offseason. They're playing Houston and Tom Savage. Bouye used to be on Houston last year. So at FanDuel, they're $4,100 in my favorite cheap defense if you're forced to go with a cheaper defense.
Nice. That's a good sneaky play there. John, we haven't gotten to stacks yet. I want to get one stack from each person, a stack that you're looking for in GPP plays. I know some of our Football Guys staffers like to do kind of a hybrid play where they'll stack their cash games. I'm looking for a GPP stack that you're looking at this week. John, what do you got?
All right, I'm going to blow you out of the water with this one.
Oh, yes.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
This is completely off the radar. It's game strategy at its finest. I love stacking up this week Jared Goff with a non-Sammy Watkins receiver in LA. So the 2 guys I've got my eye on are Cooper Kupp and or Robert Woods. Those guys will collectively cost you about $8,000 on DraftKings and enable you to spend all sorts of money everywhere else. So don't be surprised against a Vontae Davis. No Vontae Davis in Indianapolis this week, and Sean McVay remodeling that offense. Don't be surprised to see Jared Goff show a dramatic improvement this year. And certainly this would be a game where he could put up respectable numbers at, I think, $4,800 salary on DraftKings.
Mind blown. I like Cooper Kupp out of those 2. I'd take Kupp over Woods. Devin, hit me with a stack.
Carson Wentz and Alshon Jeffrey. So in the preseason, these 2 we've talked about Zach Ertz and how much we like him. In the preseason, Wentz has just thrown to Alshon Jeffrey. Besides Zach Ertz, who else are they going to throw it to? So they don't have a lot of other receivers after cutting Jordan Matthews. So I think that Jeffrey we know that he could score touchdowns. He's a big receiver, probably going to be under-owned, but that's the stack I'm going with.
John, you flashed the red Black-Eyed Joe. You don't like the Alshon Jeffrey play here?
I'm looking to see what our ownership is on Football Guys. This is something we're having. I don't know if we've said it yet in the show, but we'll have ownership projections his ownership levels, I'm fine with him being a GPP play with where we have him at approximately 5 to 6% across both of these sites. So there, certainly he's doable. But let's not forget that he'll be matching up against one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And I actually think that Nelson Aguilar is the better GPP play there this week. He's super cheap, and they've been hitting him a lot in camp this week. As a Philadelphia guy, I'm reading all the stuff.
Did he actually catch it?
He's had some good days and some bad days.
Okay.
But
let's also not forget that Carson Wentz is still his quarterback.
So Josh
Wentz a good player.
Josh Norman scaring you.
I don't know.
Yeah, with Josh Norman though, I think that makes that play a little tougher for me to pay the premium on Alshon.
All right, Ryan, give me a stack that you like.
Well, it's not overly contrarian, but I keep coming back to Green Bay and Seattle, so just kind of going with the whole game stack there, and just Russell Wilson, Doug Baldwin, Devontae Adams. Looks like I might have just taken Jeff's based on his reaction, but he did mention Baldwin earlier, but might as well take Wilson there. I do think the game has shootout potential. And Devontae Adams had 4 for 104 and a touchdown in that Green Bay-Seattle game last year. So maybe Sherman covers Nelson and Adams gets free.
Yeah, this is there's a lot of upside potential in that game, and that's what you want to lean on in GPPs. Jeff, wrap us up on stacks. What you got?
Well, I'll parlay that, and I'll go Wilson, Baldwin, Jimmy Graham on FanDuel. I think that's an interesting triumvirate there. I think that those guys, plus they're letting Wilson run. If that gets into be a shootout, you get a lot of points from all three of those players. And Baldwin and Graham add up to less than 14K, which is always what I'm targeting for two receivers. The other one, I like Mariota with Rashard Matthews and Delanie Walker as a three-man. The third one, which we haven't talked about, a running back in a defense, just from a game theory, LeGarrette Blount, Philadelphia defense. I think Philadelphia defense is underrated right now. It's going to be very low owned. They're very opportunistic. That front four is looking very strong, and LeGarrette Blount could be set up for 2 touchdowns.
Interesting. I mean, you're an Eagles fan here. I'm a little nervy that Blount is going to lose some work to Smallwood, or they're going to use some sort of committee here. Do you think that Blount is kind of the focal point of the running game this week?
You just don't know until you see him play. But the Blount's still on. He was added for a reason. He's on the roster for a reason. They know what he does, which is score touchdowns from inside the 5. So if that's the way it's set up, you could see him score those 2 touchdowns. And if you get that, we've talked running back defense stacks before. That if that happens, you're set, and that's going to be very low on defense and running back combination.
It'll be very low owned, yeah, definitely. But I like that you brought up a running back defense stack. That is another good kind of stack to work into your lineups. Fellas, this is going to wrap up week 1 for us, but I want to get your parting thoughts before we depart the show. Last words of wisdom, anything that you didn't get a chance to mention earlier in the show. Ryan, what do you got for our listeners to bring this thing home?
Yeah, we talked about it at the beginning. I mean, data is limited right now. So in a 16-game season, it kind of always is going to be. So I'm excited to get our first data points, and then to sit here next week with you guys and talk about which ones are going to keep going in that same direction and which ones aren't. So, just don't, especially in the daily space, weekly games, don't overreact to any one thing that happens, because every time you think it's going to zig, it'll zag.
Yep, I think that's a great point. It'll be fun to watch these first few weeks add to and give us some data to chew on as we go later into the season. Jeff, what are your wisdom parting thoughts for the show?
Well, I think it really boils down to that. Get some diversity this week, and we talked a lot about it, where you're saying that you should pay up a quarterback at FanDuel, but you can pay down at DraftKings. So by playing on more than one site, you're automatically getting diversity. And I would recommend playing, to play those 2 sites. And also, if you like it, there's Fantasy Draft, there's Yahoo, there's Play Draft. All 3 of those sites, they offer different builds, different pricings, and we have plenty of tools on the site to help you construct those lineups. and play. That's how you get a lot of diversity, right? If you don't want to play 2 or 3 lineups, if you don't like the cheap quarterback option that Ryan touched on before, that Dave likes to play 3 lineups, the low, medium, and high quarterbacks. If you don't like that recipe this week, get diversity by playing multiple sites. Lastly, information is power. The way you really win these is by having more information than the rest of everybody else. We're recording on Monday, but there's going to be updates throughout the site every single day, right up to Sunday morning, where we're going to have a live chat and we're going to go over the, who's active, who's inactive, and it happens every week. The information is key. Having the information, and when everybody else has set their lineups on Wednesday or Thursday, that's crucial, and that can be the difference in winning and cashing this week.
Nice. I'm not surprised you recommended playing across more sites. Back in the day, Jeff was the guy that would play like on 20 different sites. He's sort of the expert on knowing all the little sites and digging out the gems.
David asked me a long time ago to explore different sites a few years ago to get deeper into DFS, and I wound up on about 12 sites on any given week, and it was crazy, but I learned a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Devin, what are your parting thoughts for the show here?
Yeah, don't blow your bankroll week 1. It's easy to do. There's a bunch of contests. It's exciting. We're all ready to have football, but you don't want to be in a spot where you lose everything week 1 and then week 2 comes around and you're either putting more on or you're taking a week off. It's a long season, folks. I mean, we've mentioned probably 80 names on this show. Clearly, there's a lot of things that are still unknown at this point. So, save your bankroll, play light, play a normal amount. Don't go too big, don't go too small.
Yep, bankroll management is key. We've got some helpful articles on that over at footballguys.com as well. John, what is the wisest of the wisdom that you have to offer to wrap up the parting thoughts segment?
I think we've done a good job covering it this week. We covered a lot of stuff throughout the episode, game strategy things that people should be considering. That's timely. I'm not going to add a whole lot more. Maybe just throw out one nugget. Something to think about in terms of GPP, because I'm always thinking about GPPs. A name that we didn't talk about earlier, Tevin Coleman. Don't be afraid to give Tevin Coleman some consideration in GPP formats this week. They're I think a 9-point favorite. Is that right? Something to that.
I've got them as a 7-point favorite, but as almost a 29-point total for the Falcons.
There you go. So there's a 7-point favorite. The game script favors the running game. And if we know anything from last year, Devontae Freeman, we're talking about Ben Roethlisberger splits. What about Devontae Freeman? He scored 11 touchdowns last year. 10 of them were at home and only 1 on the road. And pulled up splits last year, PPR leagues. Devontae Freeman averaged 21.5 points at home and only 14 points on the road. And what that means is that Tevin Coleman generally was the guy there. And if we take into account their salaries and their implied ownership, I think that he's a really sneaky GPP play this weekend that is going to be completely underowned.
Coleman had just under 11 at home and just over 19 PPR points on the road.
There you go.
Last year.
Nice. Good backup there. I like it. All right, that's going to do it for our show, guys. Be sure to check out the free content over at footballguys.com/DFS. All of our DFS content is free for week 1. After that, you can get all of the website content Football Guys has to offer for just $44.95. That's a season price, not any kind of monthly price or weekly price. You get all the DFS content, all of the season-long content, all in one package for less than $45. Be sure to watch John and I with Dan Bach over on Roto Grinders on Wednesday night live, 9 o'clock Eastern time. And thanks for listening to this show, either on our Audible podcast feed or watching us on YouTube and seeing our silly antics with our Black-Eyed Joe signs. So we'll be back for week 2. We'll do it at our regular time where we release our show on Friday mornings next week and there forward. But we appreciate you joining us for a special early in the week episode for week 1. So on behalf of John Lee, Ryan Hester, Jeff Pasquino, and Devin Knotts, thank you for watching The Power Grid. I'm Austin Lee saying thank you and thanks for being a football guy. To check out all of our DFS content over at footballguys.com, click on the icon in front of Ryan's face. To subscribe to our Football Guys TV YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click below me now.